The trustees online, could you please identify yourself? We're just going to do a quick roster. The trustees online, just let us know who's online.
Trustee Pay present, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Earhart, are you there? Okay, we're going to resume where we left off. We were at the Center of Excellence for Black Student Achievement, Year 2 Update, 2024. And we were at Trustee Shan, I believe.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, Madam Chair, I just wanted to start off with my appreciation for Center of Excellence for Black Student Achievement for the amazing work they do. Fortunately, it's located in my ward, and Winston Churchill Collegiate is, and the community is fortunate to have it located in the center of Scarborough. I've been to the center many times in the last couple of years, and every time I enter, I see joy, I see a sense of belonging by students and staff, and there is so much collegiality. And going back to the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. It feels like you're entering a village of caring adults and family. And it's important to recognize that, and I think we have, as a system, decided that anti-Black racism, which has 400 plus years of history in Canada, needs to be dismantled, and it has to be dismantled with education, but it also dismantled with opportunities that levels the playing field. So, when I hear 8 students are meeting with the scientist to be inspired by that scientist, I'm very hopeful, because, that's the kind of individual attention and support that is necessary to remove the systemic barriers that exist. So I think if any trustees are interested, the center will be more than happy. I know they are more than happy to welcome them to show the programs, show the impact, meet the staff, and I'll be happy as a trustee for that area as well to support a visit, because it's something people need to see to know what the impact is. The other thing I want to mention is that, we've seen amazing educators who are already, amazing educators get hired there, but they come out of that place as well as further, even more amazing if it's possible, and they're becoming vice principals, a couple of days ago. Was it yesterday that we had the awards ceremony for teaching excellence, and we had 2 of them, 2 amazing educators who were honored. So it's not only helping students, it's also helping to give an opportunity for educators to, and I have one who's a vice principal now in David and Mary Thompson. So I think the benefits are enormous, and I wish that we would have the resources to scale it, not just within the city of Toronto, but also across the province. And I think I thank the staff and the students, because it's a co-created space. It's learning happens in multiple directions in that place, not just from adults to children, but children to adults, and it's important, gender and breaking multiple things. And I also want to, before I ask my question, I also want to say the presence of the center there has increased equity for all students. We've had enormous amount of support, not just for Black Muslim students, because there's an intersectional identity that is often forgotten, but also the rest of the Muslim students as well. And when things happen there, the staff are always helpful. We recently had the Tamil students gather for an equity, affinity space, and many of the center staff were involved in it. So I feel like these leaders, they're educators, but educational leaders who are going to be shaping equity in our system. So I have a few questions that I wanted to ask as well. I wanted to first ask, what is the connection to our research department, our communication department right now to share the story, but not to show off the great thing, but to actually instill ideas in other places, because that's the innovation that we need to share. So I want to see if there's a formal partnership with our research department, our communication department, to kind of keep sharing the promising practices that are emerging out of the center.
We actually do have a formal relationship and partnership with those departments in regards to having a communication officer tied to the communication department with us. And we have researchers that is connected through Dave Teams. We have a researcher on staff, and we have research associates who are part of the work in which we do as well.
Great. Thank you. And just something I already mentioned, but I wanted to hear from the staff as well through Madam Chair. If people are interested in knowing more about the real people at the center, are the trustees welcome to come, and how would we be able to facilitate trustees to come and see the program?
Well, we've had the pleasure to be hosting prior trustees at the center. In fact, they hosted one of their Ontario meetings with us. And so it's always open, and we're always willing to show off the amazing space that has been created here in TDSB.
Thank you. The director?
Thank you very much. Through the chair, one of the wonders of the center is to actually see it when students, staff, and/or community is participating in it. And so I think if there was interest in setting a date or two annually to have trustees from other parts of the province come and visit, I think it would be a wonderful opportunity to actually see the center, not just when it's empty and we describe the programming, but actually to see young people participating in one of the various programs.
I just wanted to add one other thing. So we are very proud of our Black Student Summer Leadership Program. And that program, as I said, has 100 students that we move, but they also engage in action research, youth participatory action research. And every year in August, they spend days showcasing their inquiry from their experiential learning. And we always invite community and the experiential places that they work in to be part. So I'm opening the invitation if anyone's interested. We'll make sure we share it for you to be able to see and hear from our students.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, if I remember correctly, it's also an employment program as well. So I want to finish my questions, and then maybe because I have only 30 seconds, I wanted to ask, we talked about number, and I know some of the programs work best with small numbers and more impactful, but regardless, I think we know the need is huge, and we have a lot more to do. What would it take what are some steps that are being taken now to scale up, whether within our board, or is the province talking to the center to look at other boards talking to the center to look at similar models? Because, I know there are multiple steps to take to counter or, disrupt anti-Black racism, but this is one of the key things that we can share with others.
So one of the things we're very proud of is that there are other boards across the province who are very interested, as well as in North America. So we've had delegates who have come from Texas and elsewhere to visit the center to see what we've done and to think about ways in which they can navigate in their own spaces. And we've had many different boards, Peel being one, who's come and many times, and we've engaged in talking through what the operational process is and what are some of those work. And we still work in partnership with Peel District School Board as they build their center, which should be coming soon. So yes, we have been able to not only lead, but also share our best practices, as well as things that have been complicated to navigate with others to do so. Quickly, in terms of scaling up, one of the things, and I know Tanitia mentioned this, is that every program we do, even if it's our in-school work, we do an evaluation on it. We think about what works, what's not working, what needs to be added, our communication. So we meet with principals, we meet with educators, We meet with our students and we take their recommendations and we actually do make revisions based on what has been shared with us. And so this is why we share the evaluation, so you can see these different things gives us feedback on how to make it better.
If I could also just add to that response, one of the features of the Center of Excellence is the opportunity to start programs small and to then ensure that as they mature, they're actually effective. And if they're not effective, then we offboard them and try something else. And I think that's a model that staff should use as we move forward, so that we are investing our resources in places where we know we have the ability to make a difference for students. With respect to increasing programming, of course, there are partnerships with organizations. One of the things that has happened through the center is that organizations now come to the center looking to bring their resources, material and otherwise, to supporting new programming for young people. So it's through those public-private partnerships that we are able to offer additional programs and/or spaces to young people. Thirdly, where there are federal grants or other grants that we're able to tap into, staff will write grant proposals and then use that funding to create program spaces or to invest in new programming. Please note that that staff have not asked for any additional funding beyond that which was allocated in 2020 when it was approved.
Thank you. Thank you. And our next speaker, Trustee King.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I want to thank Superintendent Murray, Senior Manager Dr. Cameron, and Senior Research Coordinator Ms. Monroe. This is a very substantial and detailed report. If anybody around the table or if anybody watching at home hasn't had the chance to delve into it in more detail, I highly recommend that you do. There's a wealth of information here. You can read about the career pathway programs. There's a lot of great emphasis on the work in STEM in particular. And I think you've just done a remarkable job of pulling together a lot of work in the report. I've had the opportunity to visit the center on a number of occasions now. I've seen the Black student leadership in action. I've seen the camaraderie and the support that happens between Black educators in that space together. I've been there with OBSPA, who held their Eastern Regional meeting there, so I saw trustees from other boards in that space, marveling at that space. And I've had the pleasure of hearing Ms. Monroe represent the center in educational spaces that are devoted to addressing anti-Black racism. Through all of that, it is very clear not only the value that the center brings to our students and our staff, but as Trustee Shen said, it's very highly regarded right across the province, and I think broader than that. So really just want to highlight and commend that. I think also of note and worth some props is the way the center really taps into the community capital and the partnerships. And we heard that really powerfully in the delegations that feel like there were hours and hours ago. But we heard people speak to the power of that. As a parent, I've seen the way the center reaches across the city into the downtown core. I've seen it directly reach my child, who, by the way, does not have media consent for photos through the board, so you would never see them represented in any of the websites or reports or any other material. I've also seen as a parent the way the work engages families. My child has not yet to finish grade 9, but my husband was able to meet with the Black graduation coaches and staff, and he came home with a package of scholarship information for my university-bound child. So that is the reach that the center is having, and I can speak to that in so many ways. I have a few questions, and just before I get there, I just want to speak to resourcing a little bit, because I think we all would like to see the work of the center really expand and reach as many students as possible. There is no question whatsoever what the demand for the involvement in student learning is, what the demand for professional learning is, and the demand for the interventions that happen through the center. And I think that need is there. It was there when it was formed 2 years ago, and that need still exists now. I think one of the things that I remember speaking about last year and that we've always been conscious about is that the center is not a catch-all for everything Black excellence and everything anti-Black racism. It simply can't be, not with 21.5 staff across 500 plus schools. So I think it's really important to remember, and I'm happy that our financial position hasn't impacted what we're able to do through the center, but it's something that I think we need to remain conscious of, because when we have these crunches through the systems, we don't think of all the ways that get impacted, and I think we have to be conscious of the way our priorities can be impacted when we're looking at the very reality. When I visited the center last year, I was speaking with some Black graduation coaches, and I know at the time there was concern about being spread thin. And that's exactly what I see in the schools in my ward now. I see the need that is so great that the coaches are getting pulled to different schools, and it's affecting the consistency and the relationship building that they're able to do. I think they're doing a fantastic job in spite of that, but that is the reality of the demand and how much that they're needed. In the feedback that's within the report, specifically on I believe it was the research program, the feedback from the students was that they felt some of the strain of the administration. And I wonder if that's a consequence of the expectations and the strain that we have on this group and the work that they're doing. And we've heard you now talk about, staff working weekends and evenings to support students. So I think that's why we see that reflected, and I'm happy to know it's something you're also paying attention to work on. The Black graduation coaches are so vital. They're so vital that that's been a topic at OBSPA and the Black Trustees Caucus. When we met with Minister Lecce, that was one of the points that was highlighted. We're happy to hear that the ministry has support for expanding that program. I'm so glad that we have it and that we're able to lead with that. The questions that I want to end off with is, I just wanted to look at some of the stats. When we say 18% of students feel they don't have a caring connection, are not given support to explore pathways, and 36% feel that they never or rarely have voice towards school improvement. I'm just wondering how this information is being taken up at a family of school or a school level, especially in schools that have smaller populations of Black students.
Thank you, and through the chair. The interesting proportions on that front is they're matched to, when we look at all the students, that's roughly the same. In fact, in terms of student voice, which is where you'll find the stuff around school improvement and whether they have a say in school improvement processes, our students identified as Black are actually higher. They're about 4 percentage points higher. They report more often being given chances around school improvement. One of the big moves we've made in the school improvement process is try to bring student voice in. So that's a really important part of student census. Right now we have roughly 6 out of 10 schools are indicating that they're using the student census at the school level for a school improvement process right now, which is very encouraging given that we have 600 schools. So it is being used, it is being picked up. The degrees to which responsive and relevant pedagogic work, which is one of the core pillars of the center, is being used in terms of classroom work, classroom practices. The bar charts we showed you showed 66% of our students identify as Black, saying they see the representation in these different formats: text, resources, clubs, guests, elders, that kind of thing. That's very encouraging. We'd like to see 100% on that front. So there's never not enough, but that's showing out. It is 18% is a concern, 36% is a concern. On the flip side of that, it's one of the tricky things to get in a school system is student voice inside of school improvement planning.
Thank you.
Thank you. So our next speaker, Student Trustee Bell.
Alrighty. So I wanted to firstly start off by saying that the center and the center staff that were able to produce this report, stemming from both a combination of student voice, but also the combination of staff voice as well, that really was able to bring forth what the center is today. And I wanted to share that the center has invested in me personally and invested in a lot of the individuals that I've been able to connect with over the years. I was able to get involved with the center in grade 9, and the process in which I've been able to evolve as a student, as a leader, as a young Black woman has been extremely, extremely significant. The pathway, not only on an academic stance, but also on a personal stance and also a stance within my culture, has completely evolved and elevated since my time with the Center of Excellence for Black Student Achievement. As a student trustee, only the second Black woman to hold this position in our school board. What really led me to this position is the Center of Excellence for Black Student Achievement. I've been extensively involved with various pieces of their programming, whether that's the Black Student Summer Leadership Program, whether that's the Black Girls Book Club, both on the high school and in a mentorship role on the middle school level as well. Whether that's going to Interact's head office or speaking with the center and trustees about the positive work that they've been able to elevate with other students that not only look like me, but also feel like me, that understand my personal lived experiences, has been extremely, extremely significant. I don't know where I would most likely be sitting at, what time is it now? At 10:27 on a Wednesday on June 5th, 2024, if I wasn't involved with the Center of Excellence for Black Student Achievement since my grade 9 year. When I speak about the center, I don't need any script. I don't need any piece of pre-planned anything. I just come up on the mic and talk, because the Center of Excellence for Black Student Achievement is such a special, special space that has led to me to be able to advocate for students that come from various different backgrounds, social, economics, racial, and religious backgrounds that tie into who they are and their intersectionalities. When I sit here in front of you, I'm not only speaking as a Black woman, I'm speaking as a student. I'm speaking as a student trustee, as a young leader that's extremely passionate about all forms of intersectionalities that our students hold. And the Center of Excellence for Black Student Achievement brings that out of me. And I'm sitting here smiling, even though it's 10:27 at night. And I'm very, very tired, if you can't tell. But it just makes me smile. And like the people sitting behind me right now, and these staff that have poured themselves into the Center of Excellence for Black Student Achievement is what makes me smile. And it's just a happy experience to talk about the center, to talk about their positive impact, whether that's 8 students or hundreds that they've impacted over the years with various different programming. Each and every experience has led to who they are. And even if you impact one student, that one student can impact tens and tens and tens of thousands later on. Like I've been able to impact myself within my role as a trustee, but hopefully even beyond that as I grow and grow and grow. And then in turn, hopefully be able to turn back when I'm hopefully sitting in a seat even older or even a little bit more wiser than I am now to further invest in the community, such as the Center of Excellence for Black Student Achievement, such as our school board and other school boards across our province. So that's what I wanted to share, and thank you very much for giving me your attention.
Thank you so much, Student Trustee Bell. Trustee Arts.
Thank you. Oh, sure. I have to go after that. That was amazing. Thank you for sharing. I just want to take a little bit different perspective. So we've had the honor at the Ontario Public School Board's table of hosting our excellent staff from the Center of Excellence for Black Student Achievement at OBSPA board meetings for professional development, but also we hosted, when Toronto hosted our regional meeting, the Center of Excellence hosted us and hosted trustees from the Central East region and worked together with us. And it was an amazing day of learning. But through those 2 experiences, there's been a ton of boards that have reached out to look at this work have been so impressed. These are things that our neighboring boards are looking to do, and we have a model to lead them by. One of the amazing things about being a large board the size of the TDSB is that we have critical capacity, critical mass that most other boards don't. We have the ability to lead on these pieces, and other boards are coming to us saying, we love this. They're not necessarily going to replicate this model. They have to do something that fits their own needs, their own student population, their own communities. But this is a model that is being celebrated and sought after by other boards. And I think that's important to note. The phenomenal work is not just within the TDSB or Toronto, that we are able to set in our system, through our system, we are able to set an example and provide that expertise and knowledge, and now, 2 years of experience to help other boards help their Black students. So thank you very much for all of your hard work.
Thank you so much, Trustee Arts. Trustee Dawson.
Thank you, and through the chair, I'd like to call the question.
Thank you. So the motion, is there a seconder? Trustee Rajwani? And we can call. We're going to do it on e-scribe? Okay. All in favor? And in favor? Any opposed? So that carries. Thank you again for the incredible work of the Center of Excellence for Black Student Achievement and the report that's in front of us this evening. It's for approval. It says it's for receipt. It's for receipt. Can we just confirm with the director, this report is for receipt? I saw approval up on the screen.
It's for receipt, please.
For receipt. Thanks for clarifying. Did we just call the question? That a mover and a seconder for receipt of the report. Trustee Dawson, Trustee Shan, all in favor? Show of hands. Any opposed? Okay, seeing none, that carries. Again, thank you to staff for this incredible work. So we're going to move on in the agenda. The next item is combating hate and racism, student learning strategy update. Actually, we were going to move. Okay, never mind. Who's speaking to this? Combating Hate and Racism, Student Learning Strategy Update 2024.
Thank you, and through the chair. The Combat and Hate and Racism Student Learning Strategy Update for 2024, part of what we want to be able to do with this particular strategy that was created in 2022, and then subsequently, that's the student learning strategy, and then updated as addressing anti-hate and anti-racism in 2023 of March. We, as a board, have been working diligently in order to address hate, racism within our classrooms, within schools, within community. We know that the polarization within our system, within the city, and within the province and the country has certainly led to a great deal of challenges. Part of what our commitment has been is to address it at the classroom level with respect to how we provide learning opportunities and education around addressing hate and racism in schools. And what this particular report speaks to is the variety of ways that we've engaged in doing that. whether or not it's through offering particular courses at the secondary level in order to really focus around anti-oppression, around around dealing with racism, and ensuring that we are providing a level of education to our students, professional learning to our staff, and also opportunities in order to change the narrative that exists. That being said, we also know that we take small steps in the right direction, but we also have a long way to go. But the work that's represented in this particular report represents a myriad of different areas that we have identified to focus on. Something as simple as partnerships, and we look at the data that outlines the number of partnerships that we've increased it from historically underrepresented groups, professional learning for our staff. They represent different steps in a direction, in order, and taken as a totality where we are moving forward. But we know that we also have a long way to go. And part of this report speaks to the steps we have taken, and even more importantly, the steps that we will be taking moving forward. I'm going to turn it over to System Superintendent Murray in order to speak to this report. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. There's a few voices that you're going to hear as we present around the work that we have done. Can I get to the next slide, please? So how we wanted to do was to begin by just setting up the context that, as Audley mentioned, there's many, many different departments as well of other departments and places in the district that supports this work. The work of addressing hate and racism in the TDSB doesn't only rely within the equity department, the Equity, Anti-Racism, Anti-Oppression Department, or the Urban Indigenous Center, or the Center of Excellence for Black Student Achievement, or the Human Rights Office. This work is a collaborative work that we engage in with roles, learning centers, schools, and partners. And so we're going to begin by hearing various different voices to present many of the components that rely within the strategy. So I'm going to send it to Dave Cameron first, and then we'll continue.
Thanks, Karen. Next slide. So I just wanted to, you've seen versions of this from the student census. I wanted to start just by appreciating or describing the diversity we have in the board. Here's a variety of different data points to kind of try to ground what we're talking about with how many communities, how many language groups, how many cultures are we actually supporting and working through and have the honor of actually working with. You can see that almost 70% of the board is part of a racialized community or racialized group. 1.2% of the students identify as Indigenous. However, we know that that number is the self-identification of Indigenous communities and students is very difficult to get, and we suspect that's far underreported. A quarter of the students don't report any religion, but the main religions that were, or the majority of the students in terms of the main religions are Christianity, Islam or Muslim, and Hindu, with our Jewish population at 3.5% and our Buddhist population reported at 3.4%. And our Indigenous spirituality population, again, at 0.4%, with the caveats I just mentioned. And identification of disability is at 8%. Just a note here on disability, that's a self-identified disability, which would be different than IEPs and IPRCs and the diagnostic nature of the board. So this is one way to articulate the diversity we have in the board. Another way you might articulate it, next slide, is through the students' own voices. So in the census, we asked the students that question: what is your ethnic or cultural origins? And that was a write-in box. All of the word all in there represents at least 5 or more students identifying as a part of that group. And it's one of my favorite data points. It's one of my favorite data slides. And you can get it on our student census report on the research department. I would invite you to spend more time than I can give it today to read through the wide array of ways that our students identify themselves. And if you think about that against the 8 categories I just mentioned, you get a sense of the complexity of the situation when we're talking about anti-hate and bias and racism in our board. And also the counterpoint to that, which I think I would like to always remind people, is how many knowledge systems are represented in that Wordle. And how incredible is it to tap into that in terms of responsive, relevant work in the board. So it's truly as a magnificent place to teach and learn. Next slide. When we're thinking about hate, racism, and bias, that's also is a fairly complicated story. You can see here on this slide that in 2023, 9 out of 10, almost 90% of the students reported feeling safe in schools. That's the vast majority of the board. That's almost everybody. That's the same since 2006, 2011, and 2017 census. So we do recognize, again, though, that, and you've seen 2 human rights HRO office incident reports from the portal already, so I won't go into that data, but there are more counts of that, and the proportions have shifted slightly, although we have concerns with the portal as a research tool itself. And finally, the incidences that we have, whether those are suspensions, human rights incidences, hate, bias, and racist incidences, are very much connected to the wider society and the local society. They're not just a school-based phenomenon at all. Okay.
So we're going to move to the first section, which is around classroom instruction. And I wanted to have us just pay attention to what this section focuses on. So students learn collectively about historical and current day experiences of hate and racism, so they can recognize and develop the skills to confront them when they happen. So I'm going to send it over to you, Diana.
Can you hear it? Yeah, thank you, through the chair. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the collective efforts of the classroom instruction component of the Combating Hate and Racism Student Learning Strategy have resulted in over 4,500 students enrolling in at least one of the courses aligned with the strategy this year. This is a significant achievement and is double the number of schools from last year. So it is a testament to the dedication and commitment of nearly every secondary school in the system, including our secondary alternative schools, including our congregated sites and our adult high schools that have offered at least one of the courses this school year. These courses, as Karen has spoken to, are not just about academic learning. They play a crucial role in affirming students' identities and equipping them with the knowledge and skills to combat racism, hate, and oppression in our system. These courses are shaping a more inclusive and understanding generation by focusing on equity and human rights. And I'm going to turn it over to Carlo.
Within the Equity, Anti-Racism, and Anti-Oppression team, the K-12 learning coaches facilitate a variety of professional learning sessions on professional learning opportunities with different designs presented to you in the screen. Next slide, please. Are 2 types of professional learning sessions. One is a 2-part session that is a whole day presentation that is where we invite a school administrator and a staff lead to engage in the learning so that the learning is continuous. One part of this 2-part modelet asks school administrators and the teacher lead to be able to develop a learning plan for their school for school improvement. The second component is an 8-part modelet as an example. And these modelets are 8 sessions, both synchronous and asynchronous, and are offered to all staff. The difference between the first and the second is that the first The two-part modelet is based on equity referrals, whereas the 8-part modelet is offered to system-wide. Next slide, please. We continue to work with community partners and service providers to support critical consciousness building as one aspect of the culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy. In this example, anti-Semitism resources that have been used and shared within the system are shared with you. Next slide, please. In different communities and schools, they are engaging in strategic and intentional learning opportunities to build student, educator, and family community capacity in disrupting and dismantling bias, hate, and racism in the learning environment. The learning began in this particular example with a student leadership through an open space for student voice, inviting several schools crossing different learning centers, different learning networks as a collaboration where students were able to come together and talk about anti-racism, bias, and hate. And the feedback that they wrote as a team were shared with their administrators to drive school improvement goals within their respective schools. Next slide, please. Likewise as well, through the use of anchor texts, important for us to remember that that anti-racism works begins with the importance of identity and expressing self-appreciation, values, and love. In this activity, students were asked, what do I aspire to be? Students are asked, what do I aspire to do? Next slide, please.
Thank you for that, Carlo. And so the next piece we're going to go through is around some student leadership. And the student leadership component speaks to how we create safe and inclusive and respectful learning and working environments in schools by raising awareness among their peers, planning student events, creating resources, and influencing learning in their school. So I will begin with, let's see, make sure. I'll send it over to you, Jason Kanakari, and we'll talk about the student leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Good evening, everyone. So with student leadership, what we've worked to do is amplify student voice. And so in 2022, we started the Student Equity Collective under the guidance of Director Russell Rollins. And the goal of the collective was to provide an opportunity for students across the district to come together to co-plan and collaborate, create resources to support learning of other students around how to address and combat hate and racism. The collective met a number of times. They focus on issues such as the amplification of hate in online spaces and ways to combat that. They did work around affirming their own identities through spoken word and sharing that. We had an amazing culmination of learning last June that many of you were able to attend. And the collective continued to work into this year and then stopped at the end of 2023. And we are going to be looking to have a new recruitment of students for the fall of 2024, and with many of the previous students serving as mentors for the new group that will be coming in. In the picture, if we can go to the next slide, please, Manshu, thank you. You can see the group of 3 students there, just some members of the Student Equity Collective doing some preparatory work for their June celebration of learning last year. And the other larger picture there is from our International Women's Day celebration this year. Been doing work around gender equity, and we had over 100 students come together, female identifying students, to learn about career opportunities in STEM, finance, and technology, and ways that they can battle against gender-based discrimination. Thank you.
Next slide, please. Thank you. So the component on tools for response taking action speaks to how we provide students with the skills needed to identify an act of hate bias, racism, and discrimination, and intervene with or on behalf of someone being attacked. Students are taught how to identify when and how to intervene when these situations occur. So I'll send it over to you, back to you again, Carlo.
Next slide, please. In April of this year, over 1,000 students representing all 4 learning centers participated in both an in-person and virtual Envision. The Envision conference is an annual gathering of 2S LGBTQIA+ students and allies. The focus of this year's conference was queer futurism, centering trans kids and affirming and intersecting identities of Indigenous, Black, and racialized and marginalized 2S LGBTQIA+ communities. The Envision conference had invited elementary and secondary students and their allies to honor and celebrate 2S LGBTQIA+ communities and students, as well as discuss issues faced across Ontario in addressing homophobia and transphobia. Next slide, please. A wide variety of student and developed and staff-facilitated affinity spaces have also been supported in our district. In 22-23 school year, data collection with superintendents were collected to identify the different groups that were running, the different affinity spaces that were running in schools, and these are just some of the pieces that were collected from that survey. Next slide, please.
One of the things we're very proud of is the work we've done with educational partners. So the Educational Partnership for Learning component is about building partnerships with community agencies whose voices are often not heard to support extending learning opportunities in dismantling hate and racism. So Lily is here from the partnership office. I know she's online, and if we can allow her to begin sharing. Can we move to the next slide on her behalf? Lily, if you're able, can you please enter?
Thanks so much, Karen. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much. Through the chair, I'm pleased to speak about the work around educational partners. And these agencies and individuals are extending and enhancing the learning opportunities in the classroom to address the combating hate and racism strategy. This graph shows the improvements, some more than others, and I will reiterate Associate Director Salmon's statements that these are small steps. They are in the right direction, and we do have more steps to go. This does provide an overview of the different categories. Please note these keywords were chosen in 2022, and to keep consistent and to track the work to date, we're looking at that in comparison. So as you can see, there is an increase in almost every area. There have been some that have stayed static, but for the most part, there is improvements. Also to note that the partners have chosen the keywords to best represent and reflect their work here. And so some partners do intersect in terms of, for example, Asian and inclusion. Others would be hitting multiple keywords. But it is an overview for you and just for you to see the work that is happening.
Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So the component on cyber safety and digital citizenship speaks about teaching of online safety and digital citizenship in the context of raising awareness about hate and racism. So I'm going to send this over to Jason.
Thank you, Karen. Next slide, please. Very excited to share this one with folks here. So we had a facilitation of 5 educator and parent caregiver learning sessions on how artificial intelligence is being used to amplify hate and strategies to contest this. And so within this, we had over 900 parents and caregivers and 100 educators registered across the sessions. Primarily, these sessions were delivered through the Control F program with one of our educational partners, Civics. I know Trustee King and Trustee Dawson can attest to the power of these sessions. I know they had ward forums, and Trustee Williams as well, I believe. And I think overwhelmingly, the response that we got from parents and caregivers is that we would like to get more of these kinds of opportunities. There's a real desire to learn about this area and really understand how hate is being amplified and what they can do to support their children. Additionally, we've been offering a different selection of curated resources, such as the My Voice is Louder Than Hate resource that's available to educators, and we offered a number of sessions for educator training across the district. We had over 200 educators participate in those sessions. Outside of the synchronous learning, there's asynchronous resources that staff have been able to access to support that work as well. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Okay, so caregiver engagement and learning, we work very closely with the parent partnership, the parent engagement office. And this area focuses on collaborations with caregivers to offer learning opportunities for caregivers and, where possible, students and their families. The content of the learning should focus on the areas represented in the data presented in the racism, bias, and hate portal. Can we go to the next slide? So I just wanted to showcase just a few things here. One is that the School Council Innovation Grant really helps us to emphasize initiatives at the school level on anti-oppression, equity, and inclusion. The parent conference that happens every year through the office, especially last year, which focused on Dr. Goldie Muhammad's work and focusing on parenting caregivers' role in unearthing joy, was very valuable. And as we shared in the presentation on the center, we were able to get Trey Anthony support us with Black Mental Health Weeks for Caregivers. For breaking down barriers of mental health in Black communities. Next slide, please. So as we think about our steps moving forward, we wanted to position a few things. So can we go to the next slide?
We're going to need a motion, a mover and a seconder to extend. Trustee Chernos Lynn, seconded by Trustee Shen. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you.
Are we good? I'll try to wrap this up really quickly, really quickly. So one of the things we're doing is we're going to celebrate student classroom learning as we have something called Learning in Action, and it's an opportunity to highlight how TDSB students and staff have been engaging in teaching and learning and embedding equity, anti-racism, and anti-oppression in the curriculum. So that's one. Can we go to the next one quickly? I'm cognizant of time. The other is that we will be having a combating hate and racism lead teacher in every school. Right now, we have about 300 educators already signed up and ready to be part of this experience. This will allow us to grab current day experiences of hate and racism and how it is tackled from the desk of students. Can I get to the last one, please? And in terms of, the next slide, please. Thank you. And in terms of we are currently working through our 2-year plans. The process is staggered, so there's some of these working groups that are further along than others, but our goal is that in our next school year, we should have the strategies ready to be brought forward here at board. Thank you.
Thank you for that report. And I think we're going to the speakers list at this point. Trustee Shen.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I might have to go on to this list a couple of times, but I'll start. I want to start off by thanking the staff that have done the work. This is difficult work, particularly in the current context of misunderstandings around this work, but also lack of resources and the increasing amount of workload that we've seen with hate and discrimination and racism. So thank you very much for all of your work. My questions are not indicative of the fact that we are not doing enough with the resources we have. It is more indicative of the fact that we need to do more as a system. So I don't want to, I don't want any staff to think that this is a reflection, my comments are any reflection of their work, but in fact, what we as collectively are doing. Because, you know, there is always, I always say there is a force that would tell us that this is way too much of this kind of work. We need to cut back, we need to slow down, and we need to, you know, quote unquote, go back to the basics. And then there are folks that want to see more leveling of our playing field. And so thank you very much for all of your work. I want to start off maybe with partnerships. We have had, and I have raised this earlier as well with number of staff as well. And again, not necessarily to be critical of any particular staff or department, but South Asians constitute about 20% of the population. And I've gone through the list of the 400 and I see serious underrepresentation. Muslim community constitutes about 18% of the population. And if you Google up all of the partnership, not Google up, search all the partners. And I went through even one by one because it's not a lot, it's 400 partners. There aren't as many partners that would identify as either exclusively or even partly supporting Muslim community related things. So there is glaring absence of South Asian partnerships. You know, combine those two, it's a significant population. Scarborough-based partnership thing. I know we did quite a bit of work to increase it, and that's great news, but what's the plan to continue to work on targeted ways of doing this? I personally, as a trustee, I'm going to commit to a certain number of partnership applications because I don't review it. I don't get to say, but I can support a process of reaching out to organizations and getting a certain number of people in as partners, applicants, and it's a process that trustees shouldn't be interfering afterwards. But I do think that it's important to have the support at the back end to have the resources and the readiness and the willingness within the department to start with that. So that's my first strand of questions around partnership.
So thank you, and through the chair, I think when we look at data at any point in time, the data represents a snapshot of where we are today. Part of, if we were to take this same snapshot a year ago, we would see a different picture. And part of where we're trying to move towards is being able to be more representative or reflective of the various community groups with respect to this area. So I'll ask Lily Cito to speak to the plan moving forward. Lily, if you can enter at this time, thank you.
Absolutely, Associate Director Salmon, thank you. And through the chair, thank you, Trustee Shan, for the question. The reality too is that our office, with myself as the only permanent staff of the Educational Partnership Office for 2 years, it has been limited in terms of being able to work. I have to share that the compassion of the senior team and understanding the restrictions and just the limitations, they've been kind and supportive in this kind of moment in transition. Happy to say that I do now have a full team complement. We've had a recent merger, and so we do now have the staff to do more outreach. So in terms of plans, one is more feedback with departments, receiving inputs from departments, as well as schools and administrators in terms of what types of partnerships are working. And as you saw, definitely an increase of outreach events and community events. One we did a couple weeks ago, which we hope to mirror and also expand in the following year, for sure.
Thank you very much. I'm very aware of the work that's being done with the limited resources by the staff, but I think it's also a question for us as a board to start looking at what might be necessary, because this is an investment of time. You know, if we can get these partners, because we often say that we cannot be everything to everybody in the society, and schools have to complement a lot of the cuts with community support that's available, and a lot of the time these support come in with very limited expectation from us, and so it has to be vetted, it has to be credible, it has to have all the things that protect our children from unsafe conditions, but it also could be a very good complement to the kind of needs that we are seeing in our schools. So I would like to keep that thought process going. I think I'll get to my second line of questions on this topic, and then I'll get back on the list. Is around employment equity. I know one of the pieces of the puzzle is employment equity, from what I saw, and we had a conversation with employment equity related conversation in the policy review. I wanted to ask, through you, Madam Chair, to staff, what is the interaction between this department and people and culture around hiring, retention, support, mentorship, or whatever may be necessary, in addition to professional development, which we saw an amazing list of professional development offering, but what else is happening in a concerted, intentional way to make sure that our people and culture has the kind of lens and the knowledge and the breadth of expertise that is there in this particular work, intersecting at the right time throughout their processes?
Thank you so much for that question. Because of the fact that certainly in a previous iteration, employee services / people and culture was the area that I was in and had the benefit of being able to work through when PPM 165 came into play, and the impact and what that represented as far as a fundamental change in approach to hiring with respect to underrepresented individuals and communities. So there needs to be, and in the new structure and organization that we are creating, there needs to be a symbiotic relationship between equity and also between those within the employment equity area, based on a myriad of reasons. So that ongoing communication and consultation is huge, because our practices with respect to how we hire, who we hire, when we hire, will affect our ability to change the trajectory, not just for our students, but within the communities that we serve. So that's a very important connection that we will continue to foster and work on, because it will have an impact on us long term. So thank you so much for that question.
And if I could enter through you, Chair, just quickly, just to say that as people and culture is creating their various different groups, they have invited representation from not only the working group of combating hate, but from the equity department, so that there's someone with them side by side as they're engaging in many of the new directions they're taking.
Thank you very much. I'll just finish off with a comment related to that with this section. So I do think that it has to be intentional, it has to be scripted, it has to have a plan, so we can actually complement the work that we need to do around people and culture. And since there's a transformation process that is happening, it might be the right time to get something embedded, because I see quite a bit of value in this. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Russell Rollins.
Thank you. This element of the strategy also will be further developed as each of the strategies we engage community and develop those specific strategies for employment equity. They don't come from staff, they will come from community, and then we will work with people and culture to enact them. So that is yet to come as the Islamophobia strategy, the anti-Semitism strategy, and other strategies emerge.
Thank you. And Trustee Laskin.
Madam Chair. Thank you, staff, for this report. But for me, it's completely lacking. Anti-Semitism from September to December 2021 was reported at 6% in our data. In September to August 2022, it rose to 7.1%. From September to December 2023, it's now at 15%. There's no mention. This is a combating hate and racism student learning strategy. There's no acknowledgement of the rise in anti-Semitism. There's no acknowledgement of efforts to combat it. There's a series of professional learnings, but realistically, how many people, how many staff actually have taken those courses? How many students actually are learning in their classrooms about fighting out hate? So I'm asking a very serious question. Our own data shows the increase of this incidence, and yet the report is completely silent on that, completely silent. And I simply shake my head. I do not understand why. If we are serious about combating issues of hate and racism, why isn't it mentioned? Through you, Madam Chair, to staff.
So thank you for that particular question. Part of our approach to combating hate and racism has been, and I think you've seen this in the actual report, we have tried to take an approach that basically says we're going to challenge and fight it on a multiple levels. So it's not simply just in the classroom, it's through professional learning. It's not just simply through the various courses that you've heard about this evening. It's also through leadership development with students. It's through partnerships. It's through parenting engagement. It's through caregivers. Because we also know that if we do not address this in a myriad of ways, when we have almost 241,000 students and 43,000 staff members, then we won't have the impact that we want. What you've outlined, Trustee Laskin, is very correct. Anti-Semitism is something that has increased within our board as it has within the city. And we are working with groups in order to provide education around it to our staff, in order to engage in conversations with our students, whether or not that's within the classroom setting or it's within affinity type spaces. It's important each and every action that we take in order to take a small step forward. We know that we have not taken the large leaps that many would want us to do, and we want to be able to get there, but sometimes we do have to take incremental steps. And I hear what you're saying, and I do hear the level of frustration, and we will continue as a group and as staff to work in order to address this issue as we have with others. We are literally 2 years into this strategy, and part of what we anticipate is that as each of the individual 2-year plans comes to fruition and identifies specific actions in each of those areas, including anti-Semitism, that it will represent a roadmap in order to move even further forward. That's part of what we've committed to doing, and that's what we will do. So thank you for the question. I'll turn it to my colleague if she has any further comments.
I do. So I do want to position that as we were creating the report, we knew also that 2 other reports were preceding. The RBH portal and the Human Rights Office report, amongst other, with the data. So we didn't lead with the data in that way. So I think that's one way I can respond to the question. But the other is the fact that we do have a course, and we do have courses that the work is happening in. We had about 480 students in 2021 and about 380 last year. And this year we had 635 students who are engaging in the course, the genocide course, that leads to some of that, this conversation. So I do want to say that it is something that we are tackling, and we understand that the report was not written in the way in which you felt that we needed to lead into the work.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. A follow-up. As students taking the genocide course, truly is not an answer for dealing with the levels of anti-Semitism. You acknowledge in this report, you've acknowledged that you've added in anti-Palestinian racism because of you're being asked by the community. And that's fair. I'm not arguing that it doesn't exist. But the scope and scale of Jew hatred right now can't be ignored by the largest school board in Canada when our own data tells us. So I'm asking, this is a combating hate and racism strategy. Why was there no, I'm asking again through you, Madam Chair, why is there no acknowledgement of that level of hate that has to be addressed? And I know you mentioned professional learning courses. My understanding is on the 8-part Modlet, 3 Toronto District School Board staff took that course. 3. So we can offer as much professional learning as we want to when it's being boycotted by staff, or when there's a course being offered and the principals point to the Jewish staff to attend them for anti-Semitism. That's really not helping the system. So I'm just asking, when are we actually going to see some actual implementation pieces that acknowledge it exists even in our system? And then I know we're not there, and I know you're a small department, but we need expertise to tackle this, just as we've tackled anti-Black racism. Anti-Black racism numbers are stable. They're still large, don't get me wrong, but they're stable. They haven't risen exponentially. No other level of hate in our system has risen exponentially. From the statistics going back to the first report in December of 2021, up until that data was provided to us in February. So I don't need to belabor it anymore, but I'm just saying that there really is very little evidence that we're taking this seriously. And I think we need to. I think our students and our staff are demanding us to. And anyway, and if all it takes is voices to add in strategies, if that's actually how we do it now, then I'm looking forward to a whole bunch of other strategies being added in when communities will mobilize. I might go back on the list after, Madam Chair, but that's it for now.
Thank you. So I see next on the list, Trustee Earhart. Trustee Earhart, are you there?
Thank you. Hi. Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Hi, thanks very much. I'll be brief, and thank you to Trustee Laskin. I do want to offer feedback that that I was disappointed when I read this report, and I was disappointed by what I felt was a glaring lack of mention of the rise of anti-Semitism and content that I feel meets that moment in our city, in our province, and in our country. I simply wanted to make that point. And thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Earhart. Trustee Dawson.
Thank you, and through the chair, I too just wanted to take this time to echo my colleagues' sentiments that I was disappointed with the report in that it didn't feel like there was any meat to it in addressing anti-Semitism and the incredible rise in hate that we're seeing toward our Jewish communities. I was pleased with the inclusion of anti-Palestinian racism. I do think particularly, I have heard from my communities that it is a problem. And, the list of isms that we're exploring are valid. I just feel like the lack of acknowledgement here was glaringly obvious to me. And just in picking up on something Trustee Laskin commented, with this Appendix B, there's a professional learning menu. I just wondered if you could shed some light on what the attendance actually was for the programs within the professional learning menu.
Through you, Chair, we don't have the number specifics for each and every one of the professional learning that was taking. We do know that as we offer, there are things that are factors. One being that when we offer it in the day, many times there's a lot of people who register, especially when it's online or in person, but they don't get supply teachers. And so their ability to attend is impacted. Second, many educators, especially when we offer sessions after school, speak to their mental health and well-being, and knowing that attending professional learning is option, is choice, is interest. We have to accept whatever it is their rationale for maybe not committing to their attendance. And then the last piece that we continue to deal with is the fact that even though we offer variety in regards to, we have, as I said, it's not just at our department alone. There are many sessions that happen through partners, and in some cases, those ones move differently than ours. People still feel that they would prefer some of those to happen in the school day. And as I shared with the first issue we face is around being able to release them to attend. But at this moment, I don't have the exact numbers for every session on the PL menu.
Thank you. Through the chair, I do think it would be helpful to understand, even specifically for the anti-Semitism three-part series, what the attendance was like, because it is concerning for me to hear, anecdotally from Trustee Laskin, 3 people attending an 8-part series. What did it look like for the larger group? So I would like to understand that. I don't know if that's a Trustee Weekly potential update, or potentially included in a revised report. But those are my comments for now. Thank you.
I just wanted to add one more thing. How many people who takes a session and how many people that complete is 2 different. And I do know that with the 8-part module, when you go and look at who completed all 8 parts is different from the number that who started this session. So I just wanted to put that out there as well.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I have Trustee Loka-Rothman.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Like many of my colleagues, I have a lot of concerns about this report. I'm deeply disappointed. And I've also heard from hundreds of my constituents who feel abandoned by this report as well, and I will be asking a lot of questions tonight. I'm truly disappointed in this report for 2 main reasons. Firstly, at a time of surging anti-Semitism, as Trustee Laskin has indicated, around the world, in our city, in our schools, this report truly does next to nothing to address this current rise in anti-Semitism. In February, the data presented to board showed an almost 300% increase in anti-Semitic incidents in our schools since 2022. And similarly, we've seen a wave of anti-Semitism through the city by the data released from Toronto Police. And since the Hamas terrorist massacre of October 7th, Jewish students, families, and staff have faced a frightening surge in hate towards them in our city and in our board. And in light of the grave circumstance, I'm deeply disappointed that this report is tone deaf over the challenges being faced by the Jewish community, the dire and pressing need to address modern anti-Semitic attitudes within our schools, and that there's no concrete action plan for how the board will meet this challenge. I also have concerns that the board has chosen this moment to wade into anti-nationalisms without deep consideration for the implications of such an approach. Using this moment to embark on an anti-Palestinian racism strategy risks politicizing and polarizing our classrooms and imports of foreign ethnic conflict into our school board. This board can do a lot of things, but it cannot solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But it can promote peaceful coexistence here in Canada. Approaching APR in such an opaque manner without public consultation and proper consideration when neither the provincial or federal government have strategies and approaches on this is irresponsible. I would remind the board and staff that activists have weaponized claims of anti-Palestinian racism to silence Jewish and Israeli voices and muzzle legitimate criticism of Palestinian terrorist organizations, and I'm speaking from very personal experience for those of you who were around 3 years ago. I myself was targeted by a malicious and political code of conduct complaint in December of 2021, predicated on a frivolous claim of APR in an attempt to silence me over my criticism of materials that contained glorification of terrorism and an abundance of anti-Semitism. And I'm very concerned that in approaching APR in this tense time of geopolitical conflict in such an obscure manner, after listening to a small but loud group of agitators without data or public consultation, that it will be again weaponized to target Jewish and Israeli TDSB families moving forward as it has in the past. And on that note, I'm truly baffled that staff feels like taking a side in a foreign geopolitical conflict during heightened tensions of that conflict and effectively importing foreign conflict into the TDSB is a good idea. Taking sides in a foreign conflict does not bring us closer to peace. It does not make anyone feel safer. Adopting anti-Palestinian racism without also recognizing anti-Israeli racism or a plan to combat anti-Zionist racism or anti-Zionism is taking a very strong political stance. It is needlessly divisive, and it sends a clear message to our Jewish and Israeli families that their pain, their fear, and their safety are not important to the TDSB. So my first question is this: how can staff attempt to create a strategy for anti-Palestinian racism without also recognizing anti-Israeli racism or anti-Zionism?
First, I wanted to set context that we respond to students, and it's not a political action. When students ask of us to be seen, we be responsive. So I just wanted to position that. How are we going to do this? We are just in the initial phases, just in the initial phases. And what does that mean? That means that we have consultation. That means all the things that you mentioned about asking questions, we have to do. But it was important that we share that what students have brought forward as we talk about honoring students through the principles and the Code of Human Rights.
So I just want to also be able to add, you made reference to thank you, through the chair. You made reference to the specific actions around anti-Semitism. And part of what we came to board with in March of 2023 was with the combating hate and racism, or anti-hate, anti-racism, report was a statement that said we wanted to, over a period of 2 years, bring forward specific reports in each of the areas. The areas that we identified were anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, anti-Black racism, and others. And part of what has been happening has been these groups have been meeting in order to create exactly that particular strategy, in order to identify what are the key things that we need to have done and implemented within the TDSB, and then implementing those. So I hear, and I certainly appreciate what you've just outlined. Part of that is the work groups that have been created that are working at this point in time. They're engaging in consultations with, and to respond to another comment that was actually made, was part of the work groups was to understand that the TDSB does not have the level of expertise in order to be able to come forward with all of the answers, but partly we wanted to reach out to community. We wanted to involve community in the process, and that's what each of these 2-year plans has been doing, is reaching out to specific community groups in order to say, help us, let's work together, let's partner in order to come up with a strategy around anti-Semitism, and then let's implement. Let's come up with a strategy with respect to Islamophobia, and then let's implement. That has been the approach, and I hear what you're saying, it hasn't been fast enough, and we continue to work at it. Time is definitely not on our side, and we know that people are being harmed in the process, but make no mistake about it. We are putting our best effort each and every day. Those individuals that you've heard from this evening, we are working in order to achieve that goal. I know we're not going as fast enough, but that is our commitment that we have made, and we will continue that work. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, I need to take care of a few housekeeping items. I need a motion, a mover and a seconder, to extend the meeting for another half an hour. Trustee Chernos-Lynn and Trustee Dawson, all in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. Just a couple more housekeeping items before we proceed. We have our student trustee in the room. There's a written notice of motion. I need a mover and a seconder to move that to board without recommendation. Moved by Trustee Chernos-Lynn, seconded by, we need someone on the committee. Trustee Shan, all in favor? Any opposed? We're moving this to board? Yeah. Okay, one more item. The written notice of motion, annual reporting on student attendance by Trustee King and Shaw on behalf of Trustee Earhart, to be moved to the next PSSC. I need a mover and a seconder. Trustee Chernos-Lynn, Trustee Dawson, all in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. And we will continue with the speakers list on the item.
I was not finished.
Trustee Loka-Rotman.
Can I continue? I have a lot more questions.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Back to you.
Thank you. So my question was, will staff consider including strategies and a plan to combat anti-Israeli racism and anti-Zionism?
I think what we will do, is we will meet with the groups to define, as we did when we brought forward the need from students for anti-Palestinian racism, and we will take it from there.
Which groups did you meet with?
We met with students.
Groups.
So we met with students who asked to be part of this working group, to be part of being identified, hence we created a working group. Let me say it that way. I am also saying to you, we will go through a similar process to be responsive to the question you've just asked me.
Okay, sorry, I was confused because I thought you said you met with groups. I didn't realize you meant groups of students. Is that what you meant? Okay, thank you.
That's why I clarified. I'm sorry, it's 11, after 11, I'm getting tired.
Yeah, definitely not the time of night I wish to be discussing very serious issues, and I'm sure most of my colleagues would agree with that. How does a unilateral recognition of anti-Palestinian racism advance peace between Palestinians and Israeli Canadians?
Thank you very much, through the chair. First of all, let me acknowledge that we are listening to the feedback that we have heard not only this evening, but throughout the last week from community members and trustees with respect to what is missing from this strategy to address this great time of real fear, anxiety, as well as deep concern about the rise in anti-Semitism that is impacting Jewish students in our schools, such as the young person we heard from today. There is an urgent need to increase education with respect to the ways that anti-Semitism is making its way into classrooms. It is our commitment to continue to work with students and community members to make schools safer and to increase belonging for Jewish students. Professional learning is not the answer. I have said that previously, and that's in part why we have a student learning strategy. I acknowledge as director that this report does not answer the question of what is happening in classrooms. Next year, you will receive a report by family of schools with respect to actually what is happening on different elements of the combating hate and racism strategy at a family of schools level with classroom examples. I would urge you to accept nothing less. We struggle to, as I have said, I believe at the last two board and/or committee meetings, to ourselves navigate this geopolitical conflict in ways that allows for both Palestinian and Jewish students to be seen and to have their identities integrated into classroom learning, not just about eradicating the hate and discrimination that they face, but in fact, the beauty of their identities. Perhaps we've chosen the wrong term. I don't know that. We have a lot to learn, and we're trying really hard to learn how best to describe the work that we are trying to do to also ensure that students who hold Palestinian identities have identities that are not erased, silenced, or minimized in our classrooms. It was not intended to be a political statement. It was intended to address the very real hurt that we know Palestinian students in our system are feeling. So as we do this work, I will say there is no perfection. We take feedback. We probably won't be able to come to consensus, but we will continue our sincere efforts to create spaces of belonging in our classrooms and in our schools where students have their needs addressed. So we will continue to listen. We are open to whatever resolutions that this board chooses to make to provide us with guidance about how to continue to achieve our commitments to all of our students under the Ontario Human Rights Code and our multi-year strategic plan.
Thank you. I think the acknowledgement that I'm really looking for, and I definitely, what I'm hearing, what I'm understanding is that staff had good intentions in wanting to include this definition of APR. They were listening to their students. They wanted to include it. I just really feel that it was an oversight to not think about the optics and what it looks like, because it effectively looks like you are taking a very divisive political stance, and we need to be thinking about all of our communities. And I hope that if there is a revised report, that you would do either both or nothing, because otherwise you're sending a clear message to our Jewish community. I have many more questions. Can I go back on the list, please?
Thank you. Trustee King.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I just want to thank staff and trustees for continuing to engage on this matter so late at evening. It's a difficult topic at the best of times, let alone at 11:45. I think that we're being respectfully necessarily critical, because that's our role. And I think that what I've heard from my community is more than just the work not happening fast enough. The sentiments that I've heard is that historically there feels to be a reluctance to really get into the work of addressing anti-Semitism and anti-Palestinian racism. And I think what we're hearing from colleagues is that we really want to hear and see the sincerity in that work. We're hearing that response, and I think we're all eagerly going to be looking for the actions that follow. I feel like if we'd been doing this work earlier, I think we would have found ourselves in a slightly different position on October 7th. I think it undoubtedly still would have been extremely difficult, but I think we would have been positioned differently to handle some of the rollout and the impacts that we saw in student activities. We saw areas like fundraising, we saw areas like student safety and protests, we saw a lot of different areas that impact students affected. And we can't go back in hindsight, but I think that's what underscores the need to be courageous and intentional in this work. I don't think I'm saying anything different than anybody else has said. But I've heard the stories, and we heard some of them in delegations, and they came from my schools, of students that felt like they were silenced or they were persuaded out of sharing those lived experiences and narratives. And it's just not okay to continue that way. I think I'll leave it at that. I think there's some other trustees that want to speak as well.
Thank you, Trustee King. Trustee Rajikula-Singham.
Thank you, through the chair. I was just reflecting on a few things during this report, but also on the previous report on the Center of Excellence for Black Student Achievement. And one thing that I was thinking of is how the strategy that was used for the Center of Black Student Achievement, how over the time it has really worked to increase belonging, but also really empower Black students and their voices. And we know how the severity of anti-Black racism, especially in a system that faces so many systemic barriers for experienced by Black and Indigenous students. And one thing that I've always thought of is that when Black women, queer Black folks, when they succeed, they also empower other racialized folks. And I've always felt that way, especially in spaces when I've worked with Black women in leadership positions. One thing that I can think of is, as a high school student, I never connected with feminism. But when I was introduced to the works of Angela Davis and Bell Hooks, that intersection of what it means to be of race, of gender, of class, I think it really opened my eyes to what feminism can look like. And I think, of course, I'd love to see more Tamil teachers and Tamil superintendents, but really when we work on increasing representation of racialized folks, I think we all succeed in that, and it shows that strategies work. And I'm also looking around at this table. We've had Black representation in trustees. We've had East Asian trustees, Muslim trustees, Jewish trustees, Tamil trustees. And I think all of our experiences with racism and oppression is linked because they all operate the same way. Before I was taught, before our thermal genocide happened in 2009, at home, my father used the Holocaust to teach us about what happens when racism goes unchecked. And now we're seeing in this context where thermal genocide is being used to say never again, especially in our time. So I joined colleagues because I know that ever since we established this strategy, it's been referred to so many times. So I understand the concern and even the disappointment that colleagues are feeling when this report is coming forward and it's not showing the information we wanted to see. But I'm also hearing what staff have to say, that a strategy needs time for this process to go through and allowing the strategy to do its work. I'm just keep reflecting on the many delegates, and we've been seeing, especially in the past month, like the number of delegates that have come forward, and it shows that there is something happening in our schools where students don't feel seen. They feel surveillance. They feel like they can't talk about their identity. And for me, that's not okay, and I know none of us stand for that. So I just have 3 questions for staff. The first is, hearing that this is going to be a 2-year strategy, is it possible for us to maybe set benchmarks that maybe colleagues could then look to see updates that they're looking for in regards to what's happening? I know the director talked about us getting an update by family of schools, which I think is really helpful. But are there benchmarks that are set in the strategy that we can then look to for more information about what's happening in our schools and how things have gotten better or are getting worse?
Through you, Chair. I think the best way to answer that is when we meet as a collective group, those who are working or leading the various working groups, that is one of the things on our agenda. So we know that 2-year doesn't mean it's a 2-year plan. We just know that it's 2 years so we can start and then engage in measure and impact. But we haven't decided what in that first I would say tester would be in regards to how things are going, but it's something on our collective plan.
Thank you. And through the chair, my next question is, for public that's listening, and we've heard from folks from different groups and organizations, if they'd like to get involved, because we also had a question around that today, if they'd like to get involved, how can they do so? And is it too late in this process for different community groups to step in?
A question came. The first thing we did is that we centered the community groups. I think from my understanding, the second phase is around consulting on what the community groups has come forward with. And so I believe within that phase, once that is fully flushed out, what it looks like might be the space and where it fits.
Thank you. And through the chair, I'm sure trustees would be happy to take part in sharing that information, so please do share with us. Finally, we saw the different strategies that are embedded, or the different forms of hate that are going to be that are mentioned in the strategy. I'm wondering if there can be definitions provided. I know in particular there is one question about what does anti-Palestinian racism look like, and if those, because it's our first time dealing with something like that, if those definitions could be provided to us, is that possible?
Director Russell Rollins.
Thank you very much. Respectfully, definitions don't matter in classrooms. And I know that different communities, including the ones I belong to, are invested in definitions. The real beauty in teaching is when you have respect for the people that you are teaching about and the students' identities and involving them and telling their stories. Our definitions are embedded in the equity policy. I would suggest you open it up at a time when there is greater chance of getting to consensus, to expand and modernize those definitions. I do not believe that time is within the next year, but I also do not believe that it should stop us from continuing to recognize the identities that our students hold and the intersectionality between and among them.
To the chair, I don't think I could have said that any more beautifully, so thank you, Director.
And we have Trustee Shen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's important for us to respond to what is happening around us. And it is documented that anti-Semitism has been on the rise. It is also documented that anti-Palestinian racism has been on the rise. Islamophobia has been on the rise. We have to leave out the fear of the reluctance to not act on those instances in fear of what the other side would consider. It's our responsibility to each individual incident, our responsibility is to each individual situation, and I'm assuming that the staff are continuing to do that. If not, if the capacity is not there, then we need to figure out a way to increase that capacity to act, because the lack of action leads to broken trust. And we're hearing that from all of the different communities that are impacted. And I think that's why there was obviously an outcry around having anti-Palestinian racism named. And so I wanted to ask, through you, Madam Chair, from my understanding that anti-Palestinian racism related work started way before October, and there was some work being done, and the curriculum has been mentioned a few times. So I wanted to know when the board, the staff, started working on addressing anti-Palestinian racism within that framework.
Through you, Chair. So we did, in terms of recent times, I know that conversation may be happening beyond, but of recent time, we had a secondee from NCCM who began this conversation with community in relationship to the resource that was created. One of the things that we continue to have consultation around is around copyright and issues with copyright, specifically so that many of the, I guess the best way to put it, and I wish I had our copyright lawyer here to kind of explain it, but without it going through that, then the liability of the board is here, is impacted. In regards to the relationship with with NCCM, we continue to have that relationship, but the resource right now is in the hands of copyright.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, going back to how we as a system are responding to incidents of anti-Semitism and incidents of anti-Palestinian racism or Islamophobic incident, do we feel that we have the capacity to act? If not, what would it take for us to have the capacity? And that's partly one of the reasons I knew from my experiences pushing for an Islamophobia-related strategy within this framework is that, how do we increase the capacity? And when it comes to anti-Semitism as well, is there a concerted effort to increase when I say capacity, the knowledge, the resources, the amount of staff, all of those things? Is there any concerted effort to respond to the changing nature of what is the priority during a certain period of time?
So thank you for the question. I'll begin, and I think the director would like to also speak on this. I think part of what we have to also acknowledge is that in so many ways, the work that we do around equity is work that is challenging and that has significant impact on those who do the work. And part of why we've brought this report forward, and we've also had different representations of different groups of individuals, was to actually speak to the notion that this work is not simply being done by the equity department. It needs to be work that's done in a myriad of different places and spaces by different groups of individuals in order to have an impact. And so one of the things that we are looking at in order to build that capacity that you've actually talked about, because we do need to create a capacity. It can't fall to simply just the group that's in equity. And that's part of the reason why we've tried to expand out to these individual reps in every single school that will be a combating hate and racism type of teacher. It was one of the slides that we provided. And so part of our narrative is to actually have it land in classrooms by having champions within individual schools. Right now, we have approximately 300 teachers who have signed on to be reps for combating hate and racism. And what our goal is to get one rep in every single one of our schools, because we know we need more individuals to do the work who are willing to champion it at the classroom level in schools in order to try and make a difference and move it forward. That is an approach that we've just recently started in the last 2 months, because we suddenly started realizing and recognizing the number that we have wasn't going to be doing, it wasn't scratching enough of the surface. And so we're working on that. I'll go to Director Russell Rollins at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try and be brief. In response to your question around what do we need in order to get it done, which is what I think I heard, we'll be in a better position to actually respond to that when the strategies are completed. The second point I'd like to make that I think is really significant is there is work being done every day across our system to address anti-Semitism in classrooms. It is not captured here this evening. I have seen it on school visits. That does not mean it's sufficient. We have to find a way to amplify that and to spread it across classrooms. The challenge that I will face as director and this team will face is that with 5 strategies times 10 lessons, that's 50 lessons in classrooms. We have to think about integration. We cannot let multiple strategies get in the way of actually affirming students' identities and learning about how to treat each other with dignity. So I don't want to overpromise. There is some work for us to think about how to do this well and in a way that our teaching professionals can actually make it happen each and every day when they are also responsible for a very loaded curriculum. But that's what I think you're asking us to do. That is what we are committed to do. And as soon as we have a plan that has been created with community, we will let you know the resources that we need in order to make tangible improvements on what our students are experiencing every day.
Thank you. I just have a few housekeeping items before we reach our limit of midnight. I need a mover and a seconder for the mental health and addiction strategy to be moved to the next PSSC, for the amendments to this special education plan to be moved to board without recommendation, and for the Caring and Safe Schools Annual Report 2022-2023 to be moved to the next PPC. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Trustee Chernos Lynn, seconded by Trustee Dawson. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That carries. And we have 1 minute to midnight. This one too? We haven't done anything with this current report.
To finish it, I'm just wondering if we could add that to the roster of things to move to PPC.
No?
Trustee, you were back on? No?
I haven't,
If not,
I
if you're
haven't
just
talked to
moving
any-
it. Madam Chair, if you're just moving the motion, I could, if there's more speakers to come, then I'll use my time to ask question, but if it's using the minute to move to close, then I'm okay to give my time.
Okay,
Wow.
so we're,
So,
If there's no speakers, then we can.
well, there are more speakers,
Press speakers? Okay.
but it's
Yeah,
midnight.
yeah, no, what I'm saying is if you want to move the motion to go to the board without recommendation.
No, I'd like to provide notice of motion that it would go for consideration at PPC.
Notice of motion is for what was originally business arising.
It's business arising for today, but couldn't it go for consideration at PPC?
so the report in front of us right now, combating hate and racism, is there a mover to
Move it to PPC.
To PPC.
move it to PPC?
Move it to the board.
Continue.
Is that what's being proposed?
Director wants to speak.
Oh, the director wants to speak.
Just quickly, we will have to take some items off the PPC agenda in order to accommodate the reports that are being moved from this meeting to PPC.
Madam Chair, if this item moves to the board, we can also be able to pull the item and add business arising, wouldn't we? Okay, then PPC.
Okay, just give me a moment. I just need to confer with governance. So is the motion to refer it to PPC? Is that what's being suggested? A mover and a seconder, moved by trustee Lokaratman, seconded by trustee Dawson. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And that carries. So the next item, adjournment, a mover and a seconder, moved by trustee Chernos Lynn, seconded by trustee King. All in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.